Well, welcome everyone to Cooking Up Your Retirement Plan. My name is Paula Harris. I'm a financial advisor with WH Cornerstone Investments, and I'm thrilled to have so many people here today. We have a terrific program for you all, and we're going to finish up about 7 o'clock. So we're going to go 1 hour. So as I mentioned, please put yourself on mute. We are going to be recording this so that others can see it later on. And if you have any questions as we go along, I'm going to ask you to put them in the chat. And I can pepper them in. We'll have some time for Q&A at the end, but if there's like you need some clarification on something, you can put it in the chat. And the chat is found on the bottom, I guess, toolbar in Zoom. So hopefully everybody's got that. So I'm excited to have, this is actually our third time having Marcia Mantell here with us to do a webinar. Her first two webinars were around Social Security. So Marcia is a Social Security expert. She's a Medicare expert, and she just wrote she's got books on both of those, and she just wrote this really fun book called Cooking Up Your Retirement Plan. And it is such a fun way to approach retirement. And Marcia does what, we met out networking and we've hit it off really well, and we enjoy each other's company tremendously, and she's been a great resource for us. But one of the things that I love about Marcia, she's got two adult daughters, and they have the money talks. And she and her husband Dan also always plan out their year, grab a bottle of wine, have some dinner. Actually, I take that back. Maybe not always wine, but how they get together and make sure they plan out their dinner. And then the girls and they do these money talks several times a year. So it's just fabulous to see a family really talking about money. So Marcia, I'm going to bring you on stage now. And to find out more information about Marcia, and I'll say this at the end and I'll put it in the chat, but she can be found at boomerretirementsbriefs.com. So Marcia, please
Paula,
put up the screen.
Thank you so very much. Thank you for inviting me. I love that we get to do these presentations together. Let me just get my screen. There we go. That all set for you all. Thank you all for coming. Paula and I do go way back. I think, Paula, we met on Twitter at a conference we were at, which was so funny. So I really appreciate that you invited me in today. And we are going to talk about this idea around cooking up a retirement plan. Lots of us spend a lot of time in the kitchen, and our industry, our financial industry, you may have noticed, we're very not only jargon laden, but it's kind of boring, a lot of the stuff that we do. So I wanted to put a more familiar spin on things we all need to do. Yeah. Excuse me, and make it more approachable so that we actually do the planning that is required so that we're prepared for quitting our jobs, which is like my lifelong dream, is to, get to eventually hang up my skates, as they say. So again, Paula, thank you for inviting me to be part of this. I want to start with a couple of factoids from just today. Some new survey out that the number of Americans who will be 65 and older will more than double in the next 40 years. So this is all about us older people, like yay boomers. And I know we have a few Gen Xers on the show today as well. I mean, we're just all marching toward, they're not golden years, they're just forever years at this point. And the problem with that, well, there are many problems with that. First of all, a lot of people don't see this as a great opportunity. I think these are going to be the best years that we've got. But half of the people who are approaching 65, they work with a financial professional. So thank you, Paula, for all you do. But they're not discussing budgeting for the pastimes they want to have in retirement, and they're worried about their finances. What Paula and I do, I think part of why we connect so well, Paula, is we really try to help people understand what's next and how you get there. And it's not by putting your head in the sand.
No, not at all.
This fun little number, and I think you've seen it before, Paula, but you all can put in the chat. How many free days do you think you're going to have when you retire? How many days are down that line coming at us? Stick in a number and we'll read a few.
All right.
No one is
Yeah.
playing in the chat. Oh, then you all are going to be maybe surprised.
We got 5,000.
Okay, that's a good guess. Anybody else? All right, well, 5,000 doesn't take you out to retirement very long, I'm afraid to say. It's 11,400 days to go. This is from 65 or 67 for 30 years, translates to 11,400 days. So you really can't enter this era like this with a blank board, with a bunch of sticky notes that have nothing on them, because that's going to derail anything you're thinking about, anything you might want to do, or even preparing for what these next 30 years are going to look like. I somehow got this little nasty cold today. So we want to create your own recipe with the ingredients that you have. This is one of the things, and Paula, I don't know if you find this with the people you work with. All of my people that I work with, they want to be multimillionaires. Well, who doesn't?
This is
But
true.
you can only work with the ingredients you have. You know, it doesn't just magically appear on the counter that you have $1 million. So do you have that?
I'd say I think the power of planning early helps you get there. But if you wake up today and say, tomorrow I retire, your cabinet of ingredients, your cupboard is going to be very bare.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then that's what you have to work with, right? And so then we have to design a plan around what you have. So today we're going to talk about, these are the same chapters as in the Cooking Up Your Retirement Plan book. Talk about becoming a retiree, planning 3 squares a day, 10 essential ingredients for your retirement recipe. I hate to use the B word, not that one, I mean budgets. Budgets are critical. Without knowing how much you spend, everything else is sort of meaningless. You need to check your pantry, and then we'll talk about leaving legacy and some leftovers. Whether you have children or not, there's always leaving a legacy that's important. So this idea of becoming a retiree, I have a longtime good friend who retired a few years ago. And she said it took her 2 years before she could introduce herself as being retired. And that has stuck with me for a long time, because you always sort of think that you always will be associated with whatever it is you do. You know, Marcia Mantell from Mantell Retirement, Paula Harris from WH Cornerstone. You know, we have these identities tied with what we do and where we work. But when you leave your job, whether voluntarily or not, you're just Marcia Mantell. And is that good enough? So what I always start my retirement planning conversations with clients is, are you looking forward to this era, or do you dread the thought of it all? And I will say it's an equal 50-50 distribution on this. Paula, what do you find with your clients?
I find the people that are retiring to something, as opposed to just retiring from something, like I hate work and I can't wait till I get to retirement. The people that are retiring to something have a much healthier view about retirement. But if they're just going through the masses, they don't know why they're retiring. And that's not a good place to be.
Yeah. And I would say that a lot of us are going to end up there because we weren't planning to leave our jobs today, but the company decided we were. So that's tough as well. So on this, who do you want to become as a retiree? You need to figure it out, and it's much better to do it in advance. So thinking about just broad stroke things, you know, are you going to be this, they call it the tireless mover, and you're going to go to the gym every day and you're going to work out and you're going to train for some marathon or something? Great. Or will you start a new business or do new kinds of work? You know, you don't have to stay at the same job forever. You can do other things. So when you make a transition and go to a different kind of business, everyone tells us they're going to travel. And I think that's great. But again, think about 11,400 days. I can assure you, you're not going to travel for all those days. You be the super volunteer. You really love helping others, which is wonderful. Our communities need that. Or might you be the person who just either decides so that you have structure and a passion for what you do, you're going to keep working and not retire, or financially you need to. You get to decide, but the sooner you think about where you're going to spend your time. And that's what this report out today is saying, that only a third, 30% of retirees did enough planning for how to spend their time in retirement. And you really don't want to waste those early years. The best years of retirement you're likely to have, if you retire in your mid-60s, it's the next 10 years, maybe till 80. That's when we're as healthy as we're going to be, we're as vibrant as we're going to be, and maybe my knees will be repaired by then. I'm not sure.
Marcia, the other thing that I see that's happening a lot for retirees in those first few years, they're becoming grandparents, and they are being daycare providers. And some of that is great, but some people are falling into 2, 3, 4, 5 days a week, and they're exhausting themselves. So it's something you have to think about. You may love your grandchildren, but do you want to become a caregiver? Or do you want to be the fun grandparent that gets to get on the hands and knees for a couple hours and then pass them back? So that's something else to think about.
I've seen the same thing, Paula. I totally agree. And we are just not as young as we were when we had those kids. So yeah, I can imagine being totally exhausted. So here's an approach. Through each of these sections, I'll give you an approach to take at the end so you know how to start building your retirement recipe. Choose 5 things that you might be interested in pursuing in retirement. These don't magically come to most people, and they're harder than you think. So the grandparent one is excellent. If you're grandparenting now, before you retire, and you do it just on the weekends, but you're exhausted by Monday, well, that's probably a hint that you're not going to want to do it 5 days a week instead of 1 or 2. But this is just an example. If you're 2 years before retirement, maybe you want to be a snowbird. Well, try it out. Go to Florida, Arizona, South Carolina, what have you. Try it out as a winter getaway. It's with 4 weeks. Don't buy a property down there, and then you start going down and go, yeah, I don't like it here.
Very good
Check
point.
out.
Don't commit
Yeah, because a
financially.
lot of people do that, right? They go, oh, I have a friend or cousin in Florida. I'm going to go to Florida. And you don't like it. You can check out local colleges, right? If you wanted to see, do I want to spend some time going back to school or learning something new? Well, what's out there for you? Were you going to say something, Paula?
Keep going.
Or the idea of a volunteer. This one's really interesting when I work with individuals, particularly women. We've always done some volunteer work, but when it comes to taking on a bigger load, they don't actually really enjoy it. So it's finding that right balance between what you will enjoy and not get paid versus what you might do for part-time work. All right, number 2, second topic. This is one I'm particularly attached to. I just call it planning 3 squares a day. And diners, drive-ins, and dives. From kindergarten all the way through all of our working years, we have always been subjected to, I call it the humble cafeteria. Whether we've liked it or not, we've been in these cafeteria settings every day for lunch, sometimes for breakfast as well. And we've always had people around us. Sometimes we like the people, sometimes we don't, but we always have this commotion and this activity. And you get to sit at a table with someone. When you retire, virtually overnight, that entire infrastructure of people that you know has disappeared. So, who will you share your meals with? I see COVID, the era when we had the shutdown, that was a big test because we couldn't go anywhere. right? So whoever was living in your house or not, that's who you had. You may have loved that time, or you may have gotten really bored. I fall into the latter category. And I'm here with my husband. He's wonderful. But it was really, really challenging for us to just look at each other over the table every night. Like, is this it for 30 more years? So I'm going to suggest you think really long and hard about how are you going to get lunch? It could be breakfast or dinner, doesn't matter. And once a week is really not sufficient compared to being out and about 5 days a week, or I don't know, 60 years. That's a big change.
Yeah,
So I look at
socialization
these.
is a big deal.
Oh, go ahead.
Socialization is a very big deal, not getting isolated in retirement.
Yes. And it's easy to happen because we do spend a lot of time alone. So this is one of these studies that I just love. Bureau of Labor Statistics tracks what they call the American time use. How do we spend our time? Now, on average, Americans spend 2 hours and 14 minutes per day on social media every day, 7 days a week. I always come up short on that, going, my God, I don't spend that long on my phone. And then you get the weekly report that says you spent that much time on your phone. I really shake my head. But what's more interesting is why people report they spend so much time on social media. And this is stunning. They spend time on social media to keep in touch with their family and friends. But you're not keeping in touch with your family and friends. You're sitting on your couch by yourself, scrolling through Facebook or Instagram. That is alone time while watching something else go by. 38% say filling spare time. Well, that says to me you didn't plan very well for retirement. But this is the real reason. I thought this was great. More than 25% of people say, hey, I'm just nosy. I just want to know what Taylor Swift is doing. So what's being talked about in, the bigger, broader world. But we're becoming more isolated and just watching the world go by. And I think this is particularly dangerous for us as we move out of our infrastructure and into retirement. The other thing which I love, I am a TV watcher for those of you who know me. Love the Brady Bunch back in the Marcia days and have watched TV ever since. And in total, we spend a lot of time watching TV, the Americans. So for everyone 15 and older, per day, we spend about 5 hours a day doing leisure, what they call leisure and social activities. But most of that's watching TV. There's some play games or sports and such. But when you get to the reading and relaxing, 0.61 hours. And socializing or talking to others, not just talking to yourself, 0.56 hours, half an hour a day. Again, this is setting us up for not social. But when you get older, look what happens. We jump from 5 hours a day to 7 hours a day in this lane. We up our TV a lot, but we don't look up our social time virtually at all. So as retirees, I'm suggesting here, we need to be really mindful and like bring it to the awareness level. How much time we spend on social media versus building our social network. And that this scares me the most about retiring. Who am I having lunch with today? And you have to be willing to be that leader. You have to make the phone call. You have to set up the time. You can't just walk down to the cafeteria and see your pals who are there. So in this section, is this part of your plan and thinking about your retirement recipe? Well, here's how you get started. An idea. 2 ideas, actually. One is talk to the retirees you know. Like, what are they doing? Are they having fun? How'd they make these decisions? How'd they get where they are? Keep track of the things you like that they're doing and the things you don't like. Then try to set up a 1 week. What will your retirement week look like? This for me is the hardest exercise. And Paul, I don't remember if I've told you about this or not. I came up with this years ago, just thinking about what will I do when I'm a retired person. I was having a bad day and my day was completely covered in meetings. right? Very typical, working for clients, doing a ton of work. And from 8 in the morning, I got the kids off to school. I'm back home in my office at 8, and I go all the way through 8 at night. And I'm thinking, oh, it will be so wonderful when I don't have to work this many hours. So, oh, what are you going to do? So I created this initially in a little Excel spreadsheet, and I put in a couple of rows. So this is Sunday through Saturday. Said, all right, a couple days a week I'll go to the gym. All right, fine, yeah, whatever, 7 to 8, 7 to 9. And then I kind of took a pause and said, well, now what after I get home from the gym? I don't have any meetings to go to. I don't have anyone I have to see. I don't have any deadlines. What now? Couldn't figure it out. So I went to noon to 1 lunch. Don't know who I'm eating with, but I'm having lunch. Then I was stumped. And then I got to 5 o'clock and I said, well, somebody's got to make dinner. Dan doesn't like to make dinner. So, okay, 5 to 7, that's making dinner, eating, cleaning up. And then Jeopardy. So I was stunned that I could not create what my days to be scheduled like we schedule today. What will you do? So working with clients, it's been very interesting to see, especially a lot of women were saying, I've been so busy working, raising the family, doing all the stuff for my parents. What am I going to do? And again, it goes back to the last chapter where you need to explore some of these ideas. And one of the women I most recently worked with, she likes art, she paint, but she wanted these sort of tactile things. It was a long journey, but she got to the point where it's like, oh my gosh, I'm going to take knitting lessons, go to a knitting class, and try weaving as just so she had a couple of anchors that wasn't every day, 8 hours a day. But Paula, to your point, you're retiring to something or towards something. She wanted to know, she's always wanted to do more fancy knitting, and she's never been a weaver and thinks that sounds really cool. So go try it out. She's 2 years away from retirement. That's it. Try filling this out. It is, I find it excruciatingly difficult because I just don't really know what my days will look like. And there's nothing but choices out there, but will I like them?
I think the big part of that, Marcia, is you're planning in advance. You don't wait until you retire and then stumble through, because it won't be good.
You know, it really isn't. And that's another one of these 2 to 3 year eras where a lot of retirees say, you know, it took me 3 years to get the hang of this retirement thing where I didn't feel like I was wasting my days. A lot of times it's because they were laid off, untimely. So they didn't have as much run up time. And this is stuff you can start at 50, at 55, at 60 if you're still working. It takes a while. So give your 30-year retirement the time and the planning that it deserves. So that's my aha moment around what the heck am I going to do? All right, so let's move on to number 3. When you plan for retirement, when you're trying to create this recipe, you do need good ingredients. And these are ingredients for everyone. They'll get to a point where it's just what you have, but this really applies to all of us. And these are the ingredients I look at that we really need to master. Living long, which I'll get into in a minute. Ditch the debt. Do whatever you can to be as debt-free as you can before retirement. Accept that we are going to have aches, pains, and illness. We are not 30 anymore, even though we usually think we are. Ageism, alive and well in corporate America. If you think you're going to work at your big corporate job until you're 65, 68, 70, you might. There are a few, but plan on being shown the door and make sure you have a plan for that. Plan for living alone. If you are a partner or you're married today, you won't be for your entire retirement, or your partner won't. So one of you will be alone. My favorite topic, and I'm pretty bold with this statement, is that there is nothing affordable about healthcare in America. There's just not. So planning for that, it's a numbers game, and getting Medicare right and Medigap right and your Part D plan and all the pieces of Medicare working in your favor takes some time and effort. Your investment philosophy will change and need to change. Your money now has to do double duty. It's got to kick out income and continue to grow. So you're moving from this what we call accumulation mindset to a decumulation. Not even a mindset. You need money. You're going to be drawing down your assets. Paula and Bill help their clients do that really well. Inflation is a huge part of our lives. Has been the last 30, will be the next 30. Taxes, taxes, taxes. Yes, we pay taxes while we live in retirement and then have estate and legacy plans. So a couple I want to dive into here. It's around living long and inflation. We run into in the financial industry, lots of people mixing up average life expectancy and longevity. So average life expectancy is just a point in time when half of a birth year, become a cohort, all the people born in 1961, when half of us are dead and half of us are still alive. It's not that pleasant of a topic, but that's what it is. It's just a number. And people were really alarmed during COVID that life expectancy in America had been dropping. Well, it has a little bit, from 78 to 77 to 76. And then the 2022 numbers will be out soon. But this is irrelevant for you. When planning for retirement, we need to plan from the point we're 65 and then getting older. Average life expectancy is from the day you were born. Well, we were already born. We were already 10. We were already 20. Doesn't matter. Average life expectancy is irrelevant. What we need to focus on is the odds that we will live a long time and well after the averages. So like I said, we first have to get to 65. And so gentlemen, if you make it to 65, that's the big hurdle, right? Because, well, if you didn't make it to 65, there's not much retirement planning you need. So you're going to live until your mid 80s, 5, 6, 8 years longer than average life expectancy. Make it to 75, and now you're moving into the older 80s. 85 gets you to 91, 95 to 98. These are your planning horizons. Ladies, we have a longevity factor that's even longer in those early decades of retirement, but then the men and the women catch up and we end up really being the same. So the first point in your ingredients for your recipe is that you need to plan to live at an absolute minimum until 92. Unless you have some health chronic issue that you know for a fact you will not live that long. You're better off planning to 98 or 100. I use 100 because I like simple math. That's the only reason, but it's not a promise.
Use 100. Yeah, we use
Do you?
100. Yep.
Yeah.
And the life insurance tables are now going out to 120.
Which I find incredibly optimistic.
Yes.
But I'm
That
going to
leaps
stick
and
with
bounds.
100 for now.
Yeah, but
Well,
that 100 shocks a lot of people. And I know at least one person here, mom lived well into her hundreds. So it's very feasible that this can happen. And a lot of people say, oh, I won't make it past 75. I won't make it past 80. You better plan for longer than that, because if your money runs out when you hit that age and you live another 5 years or 10 years, it's not going to be pretty.
It really isn't. And this is, really quite new as a generation. The boomers are the first generation where such a large percentage of us will live for such a long time because we don't work in the coal mines so much. We don't have we're not smelting steel. We have a lot cushier jobs for the most part. We have access to better healthcare, to clean water, to better food, to modern medicine. We're going to live a long time. And to not plan for that, you're right, Paula. I mean, what are you going to do? Go out and knock on doors and get a job at 87? No one hires 87-year-olds. So there's no option but to plan well and early and for a long time. So that's your first big ingredient. to build this part of the recipe, not only will we live a long time, but we have these age markers that are part of the tax code that we have to pay attention to, because this is what helps us first build our portfolios, build the bucket of money that we're going to have to create income, and then spend it down wisely and on time. So the 3 decades that get to be really important. Your 50s are super important for super saving. At 50 and 55, you get to have catch-up contributions. So you can save more in your 401k, 403b, or IRA, and then at 55, your health savings account. At 59 and a half, and only Congress would come up with these half-year markers. But at 59 and a half, you usually are, well, you don't have to take, you won't get hit with a 10% early withdrawal penalty if you have to take money out of your IRA. But sometimes there's in-service withdrawals as well. You can access retirement money between 55 and 59 and a half. Except I hate that, because if you start taking money at 55, now you've got 45 years till 100. It's a really long time to be tapping retirement money, unless you've got $1 billion. Your 60s are super important as well, because these are it's your decade to make 2 monumental decisions: when to claim Social Security and when to start Medicare. So Social Security, if you're a surviving spouse, your survivor benefits start at 60. Your own retirement benefits start at 62. Medicare starts at 65. And for most people, full retirement age, where you get your optimal Social Security amount, is 67. It might be 66 in 10 months, 66 in 8, but for most people today, it's 67. And that brings us to the 70s, where things have just become unwieldy. At 70, that's the maximum benefit payout you'll get from Social Security. So if you claim at 70, you get the maximum payout you can get. The other 70s are all about when you have to take money out of your tax-deferred retirement accounts. So the goal here is that you mark these dates whenever you will turn 62 and 72 and so forth. Mark them on your calendars, because it's up to you to keep track of this stuff. That makes it even harder, where you've never had to keep track of things like this other than April 15th and Christmas. Now look at all the stuff you are on the hook for knowing. Paula, of course, works with her clients. Bill works with his clients about making sure you hit these markers, but you have to know them. So 70 and a half is no longer super important, but I'll come back to that in a minute. It's now 72, 73, and 75. That depending the year you were born, this is when you must start taking money out of your tax-deferred buckets and pay Uncle Sam the taxes that are due. 72 is already in place if you were born 1950 and earlier. 73 are for those of you born 1951 to 1959. And then any of us born 1960 and later, these required minimum distributions start at 75. But why is 70 and a half on there? Well, that was the original required minimum distribution date. And all of us were subject to taking out money at 70 and a half. But because of longevity and so much pressure on Congress, they finally changed the required minimum dates and inched us up to 75. But at 70 and a half, you can start to take money. Well, you can't take it. You can direct your IRA dollars, for example, to be paid directly to a charity. You get money tax-free out of your IRA, and the charity gets the distribution. Call it a qualified charitable contribution. So that's a strategy you would want to talk to your advisor about if you are charitably inclined. And I'm talking about $1 million people here. I'm talking about if you give $200 to, I don't know, to the Red Cross, don't write a check for that once you're 70 and a half. Pull that right out of your IRA and get a tax advantage distribution for a charity. You just can't take receipt of that money. It has to go from your IRA custodian to the charity. So lots of dates, lots of ages that come up. And by the time you're 75, all of your income spigots will be turned on. And for the most part, people are retired by 75. So that's your task. Mark your own calendars.
Or
Now
you can
this is
mark it in the book, Marcia. We're going to send everybody the book and they can mark it in
oh,
there.
thank you, Paula. Oh, that's awesome. Yes, there's a whole section where you can know what date you turn these dates, what actual like, July 20th, 2028, I reach my full retirement age. By the way, that is not that far away. I was just having that little chat with myself the other day. It's like, oh my God, we're 2024. 2028 is not very far away.
Time ticks by.
Oh my gosh, doesn't it? So yes. All right, so number 4, part of building the recipe, it is knowing how much you will spend in retirement. The key to this is knowing how much you spend today. And I always joke about my husband, Dan. We've been married 40 years. Dan has no idea how much money we spend. It's never been in his domain. Even when I tell him, he doesn't remember. So knowing what these numbers are super important because you spend what you spend. And don't start planning by going, oh, but I'm not going to spend here and I'm not going to spend there. You spend what you spend. Maybe you'll have your mortgage paid off. That one you can tinker with. But otherwise, all you do is exchange the spending unless you're really on a strategy to truly downsize. Paula, do you run into anybody who really downsizes?
I do every once in a while if they usually leave Massachusetts or leave the coast of Massachusetts and go much further inland where housing is less expensive. It's
Okay.
hard to downsize here, and people also get very used to a lot of amenities in their home. And even though they might downsize from a square footage, they still want those amenities and they will have to pay for them in probably a newer build or a rebuilt construction. So it can be tricky. And a lot of time people's spending goes up, especially in the first few years of retirement, especially around travel, the going out
Mhm.
to eat, the activities, a lot of playtime.
Yeah, I find the same thing. I have yet to meet anyone who is downsized. Um, it sounds good, right? It's like, oh, I think we'll downsize. No, you're right. You might sell your bigger home, but when you do that, everything is just more expensive wherever you're going. So a rule of thumb, we need to split expenses and think about them into those must-have expenses versus not must-haves, the discretionary. And for most people, now if you're super uber wealthy, these numbers are not in alignment, but this is for, us middle income, middle savings kind of people. Your essential expenses may chew up 70 to 80% of your personal spending in retirement. It's not a bad thing. It's just how much you spend. But you also have to remember essential expenses are not just food and shelter. It's also all the stuff that is making retirement important to you. All those things you planned to do. And I love your comment, Paul, about the early years of travel. A lot of people don't travel so much at 90, but they travel a lot at 70. So yeah, it's a lot. Discretionary, this is the idea behind discretionary spending is you're willing to give up whatever the thing is or put it off for a year or 2 or 3 if the market not if when the market is not favorable in a year. So it's one thing to travel, it's another to travel first class. If you want to travel, maybe you can still do that every year, but you're going to travel first class only on occasion. So think of it that way. And it's funny you say people don't downsize. They really don't. They don't downsize and they spend a lot. So this is a nationwide survey. It's been done for decades now. We see the same thing in every group surveyed. Those who spend about the same as what they thought, which is the same that they spent before they retired. It's more than half. 23% of Americans spend more than they expected. 13% much higher than they expected, and less than 10%, that little pink slice, are the ones who spend less. And again, this does not matter your wealth level or how much you've saved or how much you haven't saved. It's the reality of living, and things are expensive. So one of the things I like to make sure you leave with is understanding what you're going to be faced with when you quit your job or leave your job. So this little simple math is assuming you retire at 67 and live 30 years. If you spend $60,000 a year, not what you earn, no tax situation, just for your groceries, your housing, your fun, you spend $60,000 a year and you live 30 years. For those of you quick at math, did you come up with the same number I did? This is spending $1.8 million over 30 years without inflation. Just a flat out 1.8 million. This is the magnitude that we're looking at when we think about a 30-year runway. You don't not eat. You don't not enjoy these years. But boy, you got to plan for them. That's a boatload of money. And $60,000 a year is not all that aggressive in this area. So just a number I want you to leave with. So a few slides on inflation. Inflation's been the hot topic the past couple of years, as you all know and feel. So I thought you'd have fun seeing a few things. Staples, our staples have increased more than usual recently. This is inflation always happens. So November of 1998, a loaf of white bread, I always think of it as squishy white bread from Wonder, 85 cents a loaf. 1998, we were all around in 1998. November of 2008, so 10 years later, it had jumped to $1.38 a loaf. It went down just a little bit 10 years later, and today it's almost $2 a loaf. So what we're looking at here is a 43% increase in the cost of a loaf of bread. Whether you eat white bread or not is not the point. I always get that, Paula, when I'm in live audiences. They go, yep, excuse me, I only eat whole wheat. Okay, fine. But this is the data we have. It's the idea here that basics move around a little bit, but overall trend, they go up. Not new. We've been living with this, well, forever. Oops, missed my animation on this one. The price of eggs. This is a great little story because eggs in August of 1983. Oh, I was just married then. 88 cents a dozen. 20 years later, well, where's my, I'll put them all up. Hang on, there we go. 20 years later, they were 97 cents. Barely moved in 20 years. But then we had this huge spike in the price of eggs in 2023, but only short-lived. And then it came back down, cut in half between January and August. But what we see here is in the last 10 years, eggs have gone up 40%. So certain sectors are going to move in very different ways. And my favorite is, will you give up your cup of coffee? So coffee is one of those commodities that is just very volatile. September of 23, not that long ago, pound of coffee cost $2.92. 10 years later, $5. So it's up 74% in 10 years. Today, it's $6. So over these 20 years, coffee's gone up 109%. I don't see anybody skipping Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts. We adjust, but you have to plan for this because where your paycheck was increasing each year to help offset inflation, in retirement, your personal portfolio has to feed your checking account so you can offset inflation. That's the difference. And this is where seniors often struggle. They didn't prepare for inflation. So that means two big things. The first is you need to really get a handle on how much you are spending in retirement. And that includes all the fun stuff. So the way I look at budgeting is more fun than usual. Most people start with things like, oh, your mortgage and your taxes and your healthcare. Now that's on page 3. Stuff. What are you going to do in retirement? How much is that going to cost? What are you doing with your family? What are your holidays like? All the things that you're going to have more time for. What's it look like? And Paula, back to your grandparent comment. Not only do a lot of grandparents provide at least some level of care, they spend a boatload of money on their grandkids and they enjoy every minute of it. Fantastic. plan for it, budget for it. And that's why, that's the lead into this number 5 section around, once you know your budget and your spending, now you open the cupboard. What's in your pantry? All the accounts you have. What sources of income will you personally have to create an income that will allow you to spend on all those things you want in retirement? Which are the important resources? Social Security, gigantically important. And how do they integrate and play off each other? How do they combine effectively so that you have an income stream that provides you with the income you need, gives you more the following year to beat inflation, and pays your taxes appropriately? This is where I talk about you're building a lasagna here. You put all the ingredients on your counter that you have, and you build layer by layer, because only you know what your buckets of money are and how you can put them together to create the income you need. And that's where we start. We start with the budget and then the sources of income. And the most important one by far and away is Social Security. And I'm so glad some of you mentioned you saw this webinar that Paula and I did together a couple of years ago. Last year, doesn't matter, the rules haven't changed any. The key here is know your claiming options. Understand what you're giving up in dollars if you claim early. So your target is always to get to your full retirement age, give or take age 67, before you claim. That doesn't mean you can't quit your job at 62 or 63. You just need a bridge strategy so that you can wait to claim Social Security for most people. The other side of the equation is your hard-earned money. You know, you've been saving for 30, 35, 40 years. How do you withdraw it? And we have to think strategically here. A lot of people just think, oh, well, I need $25,000 more a year. Like, no, that's not how we think about it. It needs to be a percent of your portfolio. And you want to think in terms of using the money you've saved, or you'll withdraw or draw down 3 to 5% of that portfolio. That's what we call a sustainable portfolio, so that you don't run out of money before age 100. It's tricky. There's a lot of detail underneath these two cute little images. I have the best designer. She created all these images. There's a lot of technical detail here. And that's why working with a financial advisor is probably a really great idea. So here, what we're trying to get to is a matching game. That's all you're trying to do with all these steps to create the financial side of retirement. You know, decide what you want to do and what those price tags are, so that you can line up your income sources, guaranteed versus flexible, and match them up with your spending, essential and discretionary. So your guaranteed income sources first have to pay for your basics. You cannot go have fun, go on vacation if you're starving. You know, it doesn't work that way. So you've got to pay for these essentials first. If your guaranteed sources don't pay for all your expenses, your essential expenses, now you tap into your flexible money, the money you've been saving all along. And then the third is you can then use the remaining money to fund your discretionary, so long as your withdrawal rate stays in that 3 to 5%. So this is there's a lot more to this, but the key is, what do you have? I can't tell you how many people I talked to who forgot that pension that they had from 1978, and all of a sudden they found an extra $700 a month. Like, forgot about that one. Well, we can't forget about those things.
No, and I think, Marcia, that's where when you work with an advisor, we tend to prompt people, any other monies, like we get people thinking about these things over time. And we see a lot of orphaned 401ks, 403bs, because people change jobs and they forget. And, you know, consolidating can be a big deal. So we try to keep an eye on that stuff and help people think about it. And I just want to point out one other thing. A lot of these charts and graphs, worksheets that you're seeing in this presentation, they will be in the book for you when you get the book.
Awesome. I didn't go too far afield here, knowing that we were going to talk about how we put the recipe together. So the last bit is leaving a legacy and some leftovers. And this I'm really hot on because we do live a really long time. So we need to make very important decisions early on and topics we don't like to talk about. Now, you don't have to talk about them with me, but people that you trust, you need to make sure you get your estate plan done for everybody. This is not for the millionaire with the big mansion on the hill. Everybody needs an estate plan because that, first of all, forces you to think about decisions you don't want to make, but it gets you to write them down so that people will do what you want. I don't want my little Lindsay telling me where I'm going to live or what my end of life wishes are. I mean, she's adorable, but that's not her job. That's my job to figure out. So do your estate plan. And then the leftovers are really the wonderful parts of your family and your history, your family history. Your digital assets. Oh my God, what am I going to do with 80 billion photos on my phone, right? What are your values? Where's your grandmother's wedding dress? Who gets all this stuff? This is not the legal side of the world where the estate plan is, but this is what you leave your family and your friends and whoever's important to you. So this needs a document. It's just not necessarily a legal document, again, on you. So the key, I think, to your future success for all of us, we need to make sure that our property is properly named for the next generation or wherever it's going. And you want to avoid probate. You hear that term a lot. This is where if you want money to go to your kids, but you didn't put it appropriately for each bucket that you have, they have to go to court and the assets get tied up and they're made public. So all of a sudden, all your neighbors know how much money you have. And there are various ways that you get to name beneficiaries based on whether it's a contract, by law, or by trust. And the by contract is the important one for us today because by contract, this is where you name on your IRAs, your 401ks, your 403bs, your 457s, all that stuff. You get to name your beneficiary, and that's the governing document, not your will. By law is where the wills come in, and there are other things like your home or your any property that's a joint property and so forth, that passes by law. And then if you have trusts, assets pass by trust. So also in the recipe book, I've broken all these out into sections so that you can keep track of, oh yeah, who have I named my beneficiaries? Did I get my IRAs? Or do I have my kids on there? Or my ex-husband? Well, that money's going wherever the last and most current beneficiary form is. Your checking account, brokerage accounts, stocks and bonds, that sort of thing. All of that gets passed either through probate or you put a TOD, POD on every little account you have. So POD is I forget now. TOD is transfer on death and payable on death. So these are terms you may not be familiar with, but they're super important that you're doing on every single account. And with that, so we have time for some questions and further commentary and such. Creating your retirement plan, putting your menus together, this really should be fun. This is a time we have never had since we were about 18, when we thought the world was ours to own. We have not had this possibility where we get to direct our future. At 18, we're graduating high school and we did like one of four things, right? We went to college, we joined the military, we got married, or we got a job. And we thought we owned it all. Well, then you have a mortgage and you have kids and you have cars and you have obligations. 40 years go by. Now we get to have this freedom again. So make it fun, experiment with ideas, talk to other retirees or other people. There is so much out there that we can do. But the key, Paula, to your point, you have to start early and you have to do the planning. You'll get in the weeds with the money. Yeah, that's really important. But start by defining who you want to be as a retiree and what you're going to be doing. Explore these possibilities, at least start with it before you retire, before you leave your job, or before you're let go. So you have something to hang on to, an anchor out there that you've chosen. And by the way, piano lessons is in my actual plan. So we'll see if I can deliver on that someday. And then you revisit this recipe every couple of years until you're actually in retirement, and then you do it after. So it's very much a living, breathing part of who we are. We've just never had anyone help us with how do we get ready to retire? And what I was hoping to do in this book is help you with the how do I do it? I know I need to plan, but how do I do it? So with that, Paula, y'all are welcome to reach out to Paula, to me. Um, we love working together. So thank you so much for your time, and I'm anxious to hear any of your questions or comments.
Thank you so much, Marcia. As always, you're a clear communicator. You take difficult situations and you make them easier. One of the questions that came in is, do you know the average inflation rate over the past 3 or 4 decades?
Yep, 2.5%.
2.5%?
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't
It's
know
not
that.
very high. You know, we got
Oh.
caught up in this whole frenzy, right? This whole I call it the COVID inflation. But all of us are old enough. We're all alive in the late 70s and the early 80s when inflation peaked at just about 18%. We didn't hit anywhere near that this go round, and it was quick. That last inflationary period when we were in high school lasted for 10 years. This was a blip. It lasted for 2.5 years. And with inflation, other than gas prices and eggs, apparently, we don't ever reduce the cost afterwards. You know, we get these, we stay steady, relatively steady, you know, like little bumps along, and we get this big markup, and then we'll stay steady, hopefully, for the next 40 years. But it's always been there. It accelerates, but at 2.5% average inflation.
Right. I wanted to say, I popped on Facebook today, and a woman that I went to high school with, she put a post out there, a big red picture that said, "Get a will." Her brother had passed away suddenly in the last 2 or 3 months, and she's dealing with the fact that she has to clean up his estate. On top of that, she posted as well, her mother didn't have a will when she died as well. That is the worst thing you can do to someone that you love, is to leave them that type of mess. So making sure you update those documents, have those documents. I know that we met with our estate planning attorney last week to refresh ours because a number of things had happened. My in-laws had passed away. We had moved. We had different properties. So it was time to look at things again. So make sure you do the estate planning. Very important. But other questions that people might have. Oh, one question came in. Can you recommend resources for deciding on Medicare versus Medicare Advantage, etc.? Marcia, that's a great one for you.
I know, it's like, well, you know, far be it from me not to self-promote for a minute, but you can certainly call me. I have an extensive portfolio of research that I've done on these plans. But you can also read, I write a lot about this in Retirement Daily. So if you go to retirementdaily.net and just search on me, Marcia Mantell, you'll find a whole bunch of articles about Medicare Advantage plans, about Medigap, and so on and so forth. Do not wait till the last minute if possible. If you're already 64 in 9 months, okay, you've waited till the last minute. But if you're younger than that, get on this. It is a gigantic and very expensive decision that you're making.
And we have a Medicare guide on our website as well. We also have a QCD guide, qualified charitable distributions, to help you think through that if that's something you want to do. So there are lots of resources out there. A comment that came in was someone really appreciated that you ended, Marcia, on talking about the fun. This is a serious topic. There is a lot of work to be done in the weeds, but it's also a very joyful time of life that should be very fun. And to keep that sort of, I'll say, keep the prize in mind, do your work. You know, you got to do the work to be able to enjoy that prize. But I think that's an important reminder. Other questions or comments? I know we're coming up against 7 o'clock, but we can go another minute or two if there's anyone here. that this is an exciting time of life. It is definitely something you want to plan for and start early, because it takes, when you have time, you can course correct, but it's sort of like sailing into a port, but you didn't look at the coordinates and you realize the port's over here. It's way off to the left and you're going to the right. It's hard to make any course corrections at that point. A question just came in. When is our next webinar? Well, we haven't planned one together, but maybe we should. We did do a radio segment. If anyone wants to listen to that, it can be found on the WH Cornerstone YouTube channel. We were on WATD for a whole hour, chit-chatting back and forth on retirement on Monday Night Talk with Kevin Tachi. That was a lot of fun. Maybe do that again, but and there's also 2 webinars relating to Social Security, one specifically for widows and one for general Social Security. That is on the WH Cornerstone website as well. I'm sorry, on the YouTube channel. And just if anyone knows,
do on Medicare,
no, we have not. So maybe that's one we can do. Yep.
Yeah.
And just a quick plug, WH Cornerstone is doing our 6th annual Valentine's Day lunch coming up on February 11th. So if anyone here is a widow or knows someone who's a widow, we've got another like 3 days before we have to turn the catering list in. But it's a nice afternoon for a couple of hours at the Sun Tavern in Duxbury on February 11th. So just put that plug out there too. Other questions?
That you do that.
Thank you. It's a really uplifting day. I know people get kind of concerned because it seems like it could be sad, but actually there are some tears shed, but there's a lot of hugs and laughter and remembering of loved ones. And I think that's what's important. Everybody gets to say their loved one's name. And no one is ever dead until the last person who remembers them says their name. So I think that's key.
Love it.
I'm not seeing any other questions come through, so I want to thank everyone for your attention. You'll be getting copies probably in the next, I'd say 7 days or so, depending on how Amazon gets things out there to you. We'll ship the books out. And Marcia, thank you. Thank you for being an excellent colleague and friend. And it's terrific to be able to partner with you to educate people, because education is the key to life. And, taking advantage of it is what we all get to do. So thank you.
Love being here, Paula. Thank you so much for inviting me. And I'm so glad to see friends and new friends.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much.